Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. Welcome to our first episode in this intermission section of each season that we do. We just finished Act 1 of Into the Woods last week. We will be getting into Act 2 here in a few weeks, but before that, we have a few episodes of other stuff. And this week, we're going to go back to Sunday in the Park with George to discuss the two Sundays. One thing that I forgot to mention here last week is that I was a guest on Matt Koplick's show, Broadway Breakdown. He's doing a mini-series over there all about problematic shows. So he invited me on to discuss the Book of Mormon. So if you want to hear a very long conversation with me talking about my history with South Park, Trey Parker, Matt Stone, and eventually the Book of Mormon, that is the place that you can go and do it. I thought it turned out really, really well. I'll put a link to it in the show notes to this episode so that it's easy to find. I believe that is all that needs to be said here for the time being. So let's just jump into this week's show.
Great respect. Remember, George.
Order?
James Pinneri, thank you so much for coming back.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle.
We were just kind of talking about this a little bit, but anytime I have a guest from Australia, it's hilarious because we just have to always figure out what the time zone difference is for us, because you're tomorrow and I'm yesterday, and we all have to kind of figure out how that all works together. But thank you for joining me early in the morning for you, but late at night for me.
No, it's all good.
No, it's afternoon for you, isn't it?
It's almost 10 past 11. So
okay, yeah. So you're basically about to have lunch.
Yeah.
Regardless, we don't have to get into the talk of time zones here too much, but you are one of the handful of people that have essentially come to me and pitched me an episode idea. And I thought it was a good idea. So I was like, yeah, why not? Why don't we come on and talk about this topic? Why don't you explain exactly what it is that we're going to talk about here today?
So talking about the two Sundays in Sunday in the Park with George, the one that finishes Act 1 and Act 2, the whole show. And, even though it's the same lyrics, I'm pretty sure some differences between and some things that are going on musically underneath, which I thought really interesting. And some things I was re-listening to the episode when you did it, I think last year, some things that might have been missed on there. So
okay. Well, that's great. Why don't we start a little bit more broad before we get into talking about the songs specifically? When did you first come across Sunday in the Park with George?
Yeah, so I first came across it. I went to see the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, the main arts university here in Perth, put it on quite a few years ago now. But yeah, I went to go see it with my best friend who's also very into Sondheim. And I didn't know anything really going into it, but yeah, I watched it with her and I loved it. It was just fantastic production. Both the George and the Dot were phenomenal. It was a very traditional take on it, It was very similar to the original Broadway cast, that kind of staging and the set and all that. But yeah, it was great, and yeah, I got emotional at the end,
okay. I was about to ask you that, because one of the common things when we were going through that season, it may be wrongly, but it was my feeling that Sunday in the Park was one of those shows where I wouldn't think it would be common for teenagers or younger people to get "this is my show that I love" sort of thing, because it's dealing with some really heavy themes, I think.
Oh yeah.
That become more relevant as you age, but
no, definitely.
But it's good that you had such a response.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that was maybe the first time, maybe the first time that I can remember that I did get emotional, after watching something like that. Yeah, after I didn't fully understand it. I was a bit confused.
Sure.
I had to ask my friend for some pointers or whatever. But I think as I've gotten a bit older, and as I was listening to the whole season that you did on it, I've definitely come to love it so much more, and I understand it more and what he's doing, and yeah, it's just amazing.
I just wanted to see if you can remember, if you
Yeah.
cast your memory back to that time of seeing the show for the first time. Did you have a slight confusion at the Act 1 break where you're like, but they've wrapped up the story? Like, there's how is there an Act 2 to this show?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I remember thinking kind of like obviously, like we had the program, like so this is the interval now. Obviously, we'll come back for Act 2. Like we're not going to leave or anything. But yeah, no, like it was definitely odd, and the music obviously shifts a lot. It comes a bit more modern, a bit more 80s kind of.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit more electronic sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which makes sense once you look more into it, Yeah, I think afterwards, I definitely had to ask. So that's like in the future, right? From the original
Sure. Yeah,
George Surratt. But yeah, so I definitely was a bit confused, but I understand it all now. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is kind of a common thing that was brought up as I went through all those different songs, but I think it can be just this kind of off-putting feeling, that transition between Act 1 and Act 2. Again, this is why a lot of people feel like you don't need Act 2, which I don't feel, but some people do. They have that opinion that you don't need the Act 2 and Sunday in the Park with George.
Yeah.
But just that, like, wait, we're going like way far in the future, like that, whatever it is, the 70 years or something, jumping into the future, 60 years at least. Even a little bit of different instrumentation, a little bit more synthesizers kind of going on there in the 80s version, that sort of thing. So
for sure,
it's one of those things where it's not necessarily hand holding you. It's requiring you to kind of like work at this a little bit as an audience member. And I can see why some people can get put off by that.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit jarring, but I mean, if like, Sondheim shows, like it's not going to be put all right there on the plate for you. Like you're going to have to do some thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
Outside the box, yeah.
Now, did you then go and watch the like recorded version of Sunday, or did that happen much later? Or have you watched that, I guess, is really the question.
Yeah, after I saw it for the first time, I kind of I really liked it, but I kind of forgot about it for a bit. And then once I got into Sondheim a lot more, it was the end of my first year of my undergraduate at university. We did a concert called Mozart to Sondheim, and and so it was all the music from Mozart to Sondheim. And we did it like the beautiful Government House Ballroom in the city, which is a really nice venue. And it was kind of a cocktail, not really a cocktail. It was, proper seated audience.
Sure.
And, we all got to dress up in suits and the ladies in nice dresses and stuff. Yeah. So, we did a bit of opera, a bit of music theatre, and this song, the first Act 1 at Sunday anyway, definitely holds a special place in my heart, because we did that right at the end of that concert. And we had obviously enough people, to divvy out all the parts of the cast, but plus like a lot more. So we did it, and we did it, in this massive chorus, and I think it was definitely one of the highlights of my time at uni for sure.
It is such a brilliant piece to do, like as the choral arrangement.
Yeah.
I mean, that is basically how it's performed in the show as well.
Yeah,
with like the underscoring that's going on, but it's just like a bunch of people singing.
Yeah, I know. It's just beautiful. Yeah, and so I fell even more in love with it there. And then and then only recently I've watched the whole PBS recording of it, and love that. I've watched the more newer, I think it was 2017, Jake Gyllenhaal and Annalee Ashford's one. That was really great.
There is the London version that can be found online too, that's on YouTube.
I'll have to check
that I've stumbled across. Yeah. What I like about the chorus that you just described is that it's such a small period of music that they're talking about, from Mozart to Sondheim.
Yeah. No, definitely.
It feels unwieldy to me, but that sounds like an interesting way to kind of like view, from those two time frames and everything in between. I mean, that's a lot of stuff to kind of cram in.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it was a really fun concert, and definitely one of the highlights.
As you have kind of mentioned, essentially the same song ends both Act 1 in Act 2 of Sunday in the Park with George. Like, the lyrics don't change for sure. Now, there are, I will say, slight differences between the two. I can always tell if it comes up on my shuffle, at least from the original Broadway cast, the one that has a bunch of people arguing at the very beginning means, oh, this is the end of Act 1.
Yeah.
Because it's all the characters arguing and then it goes into Sunday.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it just starts, then it's like, okay, this is the end of Act 2. That's kind of the way that I know the difference between them, because both of them are just called Sunday on the album, so it's not very helpful sometimes to know which one is which.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess let's start with the Act 1 Sunday. Where do you want to start? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, I think, like, firstly, it starts off with, you know, the arpeggiated chords, the da-da-da-da-da, like, and, you know, and then he says his famous words, design, tension, and one thing that I really liked that you brought up in the previous episode was when he says tension, the two Celestes and Jules and Yvonne, I think it is, who were like arguing the most, because the Celestes about the two soldiers, you know, which one they're gonna get with, and then Jules and Yvonne, because I think like Jules was caught cheating on her or whatever. Like the daughter comes in and says, you know, and that's just really clever that he puts in the stage directions here, he says, you know, like he nods and then they go together, and that's when he says tension. So. Like I thought that was really clever. And then as well, fast forwarding to the end of the Act 1 song, in a lot of the show, I feel like Sondheim like emanates the words into his music as well. So for example, right at the end of it, so this is just before the interval, that, you know, the final Sunday, and then it goes, you know, da 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 da, and then that third like chord just before the resolution, you know, is like it's like a B flat against an A. So in other words, that's like it's a semitone, so like half a step. So yeah, in other words, you can't get any more clashier, like in Western art, you know, music anyway. Like you can't get, so it's kind of that tension, and then he resolves to this like just simple G major chord. And then he has the tremolo, and then that ends it. But yeah, I think I was watching an interview with Sondheim, and I think someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that G major chord right at the end there is the first proper, just simple major chord in the whole show so far that we hear.
Okay,
yeah. If that makes sense, because obviously the show, you know, the music's it's definitely very experimental from his previous shows in terms of and so I thought that was really cool. You know, we go through his like a bit of his life with Dot, you know, their relationship, and you know, and then she leaves, and how, you know, he's fixated on this painting, he wants to get it done, you know, it's all his work, and that's all the tension happening, and then it kind of resolves at the end of that Act 1 song there. So I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, that's the cool part of this, is that the more you kind of pick at what Sondheim is musically doing, like what the notes are that he has chosen to put under what they're singing, it kind of just opens it up. And I this is the thing about, even though I can read music, I played the clarinet for 6 years in like middle school to high school. So I have some experience of being in a band and reading sheet music, all that kind of stuff, and understanding major versus minor and all these kinds of things. But I also feel I never really know how to talk about music, even though I host a podcast about music. I have a hard time being like, explaining like, this is why musically this is happening, and this is why it's important, and this is why it's important to know this. But that's why I love this show in particular, is that everything is so considered to the point where even though I cannot verbally say this is what is happening in this song, as you were describing that, is like, yeah, that all makes sense. Of course, this is what is happening. Underneath this, it's fitting thematically with what's going on in the show. And that's what I'm experiencing as a viewer of this show. It's like, yeah, this feels like so tense right now. And then it just opens up into like this song. It's like, okay, like there's this explosion of like resolution that's happening here at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in classical music as well, they talk about tension and resolution. Like that's kind of a lot of the format of like a good like classical Western art song. And I think he's obviously, you know, use that there like but really well.
Hey everyone, just Kyle breaking into the conversation to tell you about some of the people that make this show continue to go. If you'd like to help support the show for absolutely free, you can give a rating and review on whatever app you listen to podcasts in. That's, of course, greatly appreciated. Putting It Together is an independent podcast, so if you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help to grow and make this show better, you can do so over at our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. I should also give a huge thank you to the God That's Good tier from Patreon. That's Barry, Alex, Christopher G, Jack, Luis, Mike, Robert, Stephen, Todd, and Whitty. Let's get back to the show. Not that we have to go like too far off track here, but I'm just interested in it. You, of course, have sung opera and have done performances. Does this score remind you of any other composers? Like, is there anything that instantly comes to mind for you? I know I'm throwing this at you without any preparation, but I'm curious if there is any.
No, that's okay. It's a really good question. Not like any particular like composer or work that I could think of. Well, I mean, in saying that, it has a bit of, not as grand as and big as Bernstein, but it kind of has a bit of Bernstein-esque stuff going on there, but a bit of Candide maybe, like with the big harmonies and choruses. But I think it's definitely especially this one, like it's definitely an attraction for classically trained singers like myself to lean towards more, because I think like definitely singers with kind of bigger voices are kind of cast in those roles, because it's kind of got this obviously it's got this really beautiful lush orchestration. So I think that's why like it definitely attracts them more to it. But in terms of pieces, doesn't bring to mind one in particular that I can think of off the top of my head.
No, it's interesting you bring the Candide up specifically. You wouldn't know this, but weirdly enough, I've been listening to Candide a lot here over the last couple of weeks. I think it's because I watched the movie Maestro.
Yes.
and then it was like, it was in my head, and like I should like explore this even more, because I like a lot of the music.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And much like Merrily We Roll Along, Candide is a show that when I see it performed, I'm never like in love with it, but I like listening to the music because I think the music's great.
Yeah. So
but especially like stuff like Auto da Fe, which I know Sondheim wrote a couple of lyrics for that song. But there's some other of the choral stuff that's inside that show that does kind of sound similar to this Sunday song, or the two Sundays that happen in here. Yeah. So maybe there was, because I can't remember now. I'd have to double check the book of when Sondheim helped write some of those new lyrics. I can't remember if it was in the 80s or the late 70s is when he jumped in.
Yeah, I want to say it was before he wrote Sunday.
It definitely was.
Yeah.
It was definitely before. I just can't remember where in the timeline that happens. In fact, I think it might have even been before Sweeney Todd, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, okay.
So I think it was late 70s.
Yeah, sure.
But maybe he still has, that technically would have only been 5 years before this.
Good.
So I mean,
yeah. No, I was just going to say, it's funny you bring up the Maestro thing, actually, because in that same Mozart Sondheim concert, we did Make Our Garden Grow.
Right. Yeah.
And of course that one gets a feature in the movie that he's conducting in the studio. So it was this one and Make Our Garden Grow that I was kind of like, oh wow, this is beautiful.
This is good stuff. I have to say, not that this is turning into like a Maestro podcast, but I have to say, I mean, this is like the common criticism I've heard from a lot of people about how it doesn't really get into Bernstein's life very much within that movie. But what I will say, which I find hilarious, and it works for me, but it's like I love all of the essentially like soundtrack drops that happen in there, because it's all Bernstein music. Yeah, but it's like, oh, it's West Side Story. We're not focusing on West Side Story, but that's West Side Story. It's like, oh, that's Candide. We're not focusing on Candide, but that's from Candide. You know, so it's like all these like things that are popping out of there. So that I know, okay, I kind of know where we are in the timeline, but I think a casual viewer would be like, oh, I guess this is part of the soundtrack.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought was really really clever. Like because I mean, why wouldn't you use his music as the background music? You know, if it's a movie about him. Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, I guess one thing I guess we should, before we move on to the Act 2 one.
Yeah.
Let me just open up this book here. Not that we have to like re-go over all the lyrics here again. People can go back and listen to that entire episode that we did. Well, not we did, but that I did with another guest.
Yes.
But I like talking about it because what I find so, I don't know, dramatically hilarious is just on the face of it. If you were to tell someone or give them a sheet of paper with these lyrics printed out for them to read, it is gibberish nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, it is absolutely nothing. And yet when I hear it performed, it always moves me. It's like, yes, this like, and I mean, it makes even more sense if you watch the show. Like there is like relevance to what these words mean. It's not just made up stuff, but like by the cool blue triangular water on the soft green elliptical grass, as we pass through arrangements of shadows towards the verticals of trees forever. There's a lot going on there in what they're talking about, but like, but I don't know. I just to throw it at you a little bit, like, because you've even performed this song, like, how do you approach these lyrics and how do you perform them so that they still have meaning to you?
Yeah, well, like another thing that you can do, which is really nice, is create a visual like on stage. Like you have the liberty to do that. Kind of stand in, you know, like sort of a formation and not necessarily in a clump as a choir, you know, but you know, stand, you know, like like with your parts and even like, you know, mixed up because you know you can hear the harmonies from the different places. I think obviously Sondheim, you know, writes everything for a reason. So he you know, he put because in the score here, you know, it's got George and the two Celestes on that top melody line, let's say, and I think, you know, if you put any more people on there, like it'd probably be too overpowered. Like I think as well, it's really clever if you fast forward a bit as well. You know, like when everyone kind of drops out and then he adds more people in, and then it crescendos into this, you know, that final on an ordinary Sunday.
Right.
And so I think they're just a few things that you could do to bring out the lyrics more. And I remember you saying on the previous time you went through the song as well, it's like they definitely, like if you look at them just on a sheet of paper, like the words, like it's definitely just like a work of poetry. So I think to treat it like as a, you know, as almost a Shakespeare poem or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. One thing you brought up here, though, too, is how the voices are kind of layered in this song, because even just listening to it as it stands, like the women and the men and I don't know what the third group is, but it almost feels like there's 3-part harmony going on in certain cases. Like they get layered onto each other, and even when there's like that ascending line at the end, each one kind of comes in at a different kind of spot as they ratchet up. To the climax that's going on here. It's so beautiful. Oh, definitely. This is gonna sound like I'm being paid for like a promotion, and I swear I'm not. Although I would not turn it down. So I am an Apple fanboy. Just to be upfront about this, but they have this new kind of marketing gimmick called spatial audio. So if you have like the right headphones, you can listen to it, and it feels like you're being surrounded, like you're literally in the middle of a surround sound sort of thing. Cool. So there's 3 albums that have been released specifically with this feature for Sondheim scores, which is the original Company, the original Sweeney Todd, and the original Into the Woods are the 3 that actually have this feature. Right. Which, by the way, if you listen to the Sweeney Todd score in it, it is bonkers crazy. It really feels like you're in the middle of the stage and they're all like surrounding you. It's wild. It's such a fun time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I want them to do it for this. I really want them to have it for Sunday in the Park with George, but for this moment specifically, so it feels like you're like literally being surrounded by the chorus. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Wow.
Anyways, this is me not getting paid to promote a feature. So yes, so then we get through the entire second act, and we hear essentially the same song again, which I think is a gambit in a few different ways. One, because not that musical theater hasn't had reprises before where you sing most of the same thing, but I will say this is pretty unique for a Sondheim show in that there's no word changes. Usually when there's a reprise in a Sondheim show, it's the same melody, but the words have changed
Yes.
to like create a different meaning to what the reprise is doing.
Exactly right.
In this case, there isn't. But has there been any changes as far as musically?
Yes, definitely. First, because again, comparing the two, the Act One Sunday has quite a few of those arpeggiated, but then in this one, it kind of has. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just has the one, and it's like, and it pauses on that crunchy chord
Right.
there, and then he says order, and then continues on with it, and actually, I think in this one it starts off. It's got here, because George isn't actually singing to start off with in this song, in this one anyway.
That's right.
It's got the soldier, the two Celestes on the top like melody line, and then it's got like all the rest of them. I'm assuming like the women on the top line, and then the gentleman on the bottom line, as opposed to three lines, which was going on in the first one. And it's got the same pretty much accompaniment underneath. But then when we get to By the Blue, Purple, Yellow, Red Water, it's got this even bigger harmony than the first one. Yes, no, it does. Yeah, like in looking at this, it's got just more kind of layered harmony. Like it's just in G major there. Yeah, like that's going on there. And then what's different about this is after they say of the grass in our perfect park is said just by Dot, but by herself in this one. And I think in the first one that was just said by George.
Oh, that's true. You're right.
Yeah. She kind of has a bit, and I think that's kind of like making him remember that was like that's where like they all started. Well, Dot and George anyway. He was painting her in the park, and that was kind of their park as like when they were together in a relationship, and that's what it will always be to them. Like if that makes sense, I feel like. And then George carries on, made of flecks of light and dark, because he's the painter, to do with the painting. And then it finishes off pretty much the same. And then, of course, George has his beautiful lines at the end: white, a blank page or canvas, his favorite, so many possibilities. And what I love in the Mandy Patinkin does it in particular, but like he goes, so many, like he takes like almost
the briefest of pauses,
like almost like too long of a pause, but it's just like the perfect amount, and then it just ends. It's beautiful.
It's not trumpets. What are they? Oh, French horns.
French horn, yes.
French horns.
Yeah. The
underrated instrument. Can I just say that the French horn? I think there should be more French horns used in scores.
There definitely should be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is stuff that I love, of course, like nerding out about, which is like. This person says this line in this instance, and this is why it makes it even more impactful in this moment. I mean, there's kind of two final questions I have for you. One, not that there needs to be, but I always like to kind of like do this thought experiment, film versions of musicals. And I keep getting burned because a lot of my favorites have been turned into movies and they aren't very good. But I keep thinking like, it's going to work. I feel like someone's going to make this work.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is just best preserved as a stage show, or do you see could this work in the different format of film?
Yeah, it's a hard one because like on one hand, I think it's just perfect for the stage and the theater. It should stay like that, and it was written to be in a theater. I feel like some aspects would be tricky to portray onto film in a way, but also, and then on the other hand, like I'd really love for someone to give it a crack, because it could be amazing or it could be very bad at the same time.
It could be. I mean, that's always the fear, depending on like the creative team that gets their hands on it and doing it. I mean, if this ever were like, this could not be like $100 million film, because there's no way they would probably make its money back. But I think about it, and have you heard of this of the film Being Vincent?
No, I don't think so.
It's basically about Van Gogh, but it's like every frame was actually hand painted in like Vincent Van Gogh style. It's it's a beautiful animated piece. I recently stumbled across it, and I only bring that up because I saw that. I'm like, oh, this would be such a cool way to approach this material for some of the songs.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, you can still have like the classic like drama between Dot and George and that kind of stuff, but as soon as he starts to paint, it's like, wouldn't it be cool if it's like his dots are animation and we could use that, and the whole day off sequence could be like an animated sequence. I think there's some fun stuff that you could kind of do it there with dots specifically, like growing into characters and interacting with people.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I think yeah, with this specifically, you definitely have to think out of the box. Yeah, put something onto film for sure. Yeah.
And you could have them bow at the end, just like they do in the stage show. So you could do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so good.
The question I did ask, I was trying to remember this here earlier today, and I finally remembered my hard question that I asked everyone during the Sunday in the Park with George season.
Oh, yeah.
Which I did not prepare you for at all. So you can feel part of the club because I didn't do it with anyone during that season. It felt like, because Sunday in the Park with George is based in part on a painting, which is kind of an odd thing to base a musical around. Although there's another show coming to Broadway this year that's kind of based on paintings, which I think is fun.
Oh, really? No. Okay.
Yeah, Lampica. It's more of like an artist, but apparently it's all about painting and Art Deco and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Regardless, is there something odd that you think should be turned into a musical? Some like odd piece of media or art or found object that you think could work in a musical format?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing to come to mind, actually, it's not an object or a piece of media or anything, but a person actually, and you mentioning Vincent van Gogh made me sort of think of it. Yeah, like it doesn't necessarily have to be about him, but I think semi or like autobiographical musical, like about a famous person like that. And the reason why I thought of it was because there's a beautiful song cycle written by this American composer. He's still alive. He only wrote them 2007 or something.
Okay.
Ben Moore, I think his name is. Don't know if you've heard.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
What's the song cycle called?
It's called Dear Theo. So what he's done is he took these letters, the actual letters that Vincent van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo, and he put them into this song cycle, and it's really beautiful. Like it's very Sondheim-esque actually, sort of down that train. And yeah, so something like along the lines of that. So something to do with Vincent van Gogh. I feel like I know obviously it's like another artist, but yeah, like I reckon that could be cool maybe.
You bring that up. I don't know why this suddenly popped into my head. There's something we said to be doing something like that, where like you're honoring an artist, and my mind immediately flew to the fact that at least on Broadway, like the American stage, we'll just call it, for like original musicals, I'm surprised there hasn't been more that are based off of famous composers as like the subject matter. Yeah. Like there's more on like authoritarian rulers than there has been on like famous composers, it feels like. Yeah. Like it's because the only one that jumps to mind, it's not a very well-known show, but it's called George M, I think. That's on about George Cohan. Okay. But like there isn't one like about the Gershwins. There isn't one about Bernstein. There isn't one about like some of like these famous people that have, like Oscar Hammerstein, for instance, or like there's no shows about these like huge titans of the industry the way that there is in, say, again, Hollywood, where there's always like a biopic about like a famous actor or director or something like that that comes out every couple of years. So interesting thing that hasn't been a thing that the people have gone to the well for. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's like half the reason why I thought of that, actually. Yeah. Like I feel like the only other thing I can think of is obviously assassins that Sondheim wrote about, all the the presidents and the guys who assassinated them. But yeah. Well, James, thank you so much for joining me here today. If people wanted to stay in contact with you, see what you're up to, what's the easiest way to do so online? Yeah, so I'm on probably Instagram, best place to reach me. My like artist one is James Pinneri Baritone, I think it is. Could be some underscores. Or my actual one is J Pinnizzle, so JPINNIZLE. Yeah, or alternatively, you could give me an email to jpinneri99@gmail.com. Cool, perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me again, Kyle. Appreciate it.
This world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. starry, starry night.
Thank you so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Sondheim Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. This is an independent production, and you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Putting Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, we're actually going to be talking about Evening Primrose and some other odds and sods. Mostly you've discovered that I've been a mannequin this entire time. As always, a big thank you to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.
You tried to set them free. They would not listen, they're not listening still. Perhaps they never will.